in the cradle of civilization, long before the pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky, a different kind of dawn was breaking in the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia. It was here, between the slow, life-giving currents of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, that humanity first began to weave the intricate tapestry of complex society, starting around 6,500 BCE. Imagine a vast, flat plain shimmering under an ancient sun, where the yearly floods of these two great rivers deposited rich, dark silt, transforming what might otherwise have been a barren landscape into a verdant ribbon of possibility. This was the stage upon which the earliest acts of human settlement unfolded, leading to the very first stirrings of urban life. The story begins with scattered agricultural communities, small clusters of reed huts and mud-brick dwellings nestled along the riverbanks. These early inhabitants, often referred to as the Ubaid people, were pioneers in every sense of the word. They learned to harness the unpredictable power of the rivers, developing rudimentary irrigation systems, simple canals and ditches that diverted water from the main channels to their fields of barley and wheat. This mastery over water, a fundamental shift from rain-fed agriculture, allowed for surplus food production, a concept that would utterly transform human existence. No longer did every individual need to spend their days foraging or hunting. Some could specialize, dedicating their time to crafts, administration, or even religious rituals. The Ubaid period, roughly from 6,500 to 4,100 BCE, is characterized by a gradual but profound evolution in social organization. We see evidence of larger, more permanent settlements emerging, such as Eridu, often considered one of the world's first cities, though perhaps proto-city is a more accurate term for its earliest phases. Eridu, located in the southern Mesopotamian plain, began as a small fishing village, but over millennia it grew into a significant religious center. Archaeological excavations at Eridu have revealed a continuous sequence of temple structures, built one upon the ruins of another, suggesting a profound and enduring spiritual devotion among its inhabitants. The earliest temple, a simple shrine, dates back to the Ubaid period, indicating that religious practices were central to community life even in these nascent stages. These Ubaid communities shared a distinctive material culture. Their pottery, often found across wide geographical areas, is a hallmark of this era. It's typically wheel-made, painted with geometric designs in dark colors on a buff or greenish background, and its widespread distribution suggests a network of trade and cultural exchange. Imagine these finely crafted vessels, perhaps holding grains or water, moving along ancient river routes, connecting disparate villages and fostering a sense of shared identity across the Mesopotamian plain. This shared pottery style is one of the key indicators that archaeologists use to define the Ubaid culture, suggesting a degree of cultural homogeneity that transcended individual settlements. Beyond pottery, the Ubaid people left behind intriguing artifacts that hint at their beliefs and daily lives. Figurines, often depicting women with elongated heads and slit eyes, have been found in various sites. The exact purpose of these figurines remains a subject of scholarly debate. Were they fertility symbols, representations of deities, or perhaps even toys? Historians still disagree whether these figures represent a widespread cult or simply a common artistic style. Their consistent form across different sites, however, suggests a shared cultural understanding, whatever their precise function. As Ubaid settlements grew, so too did their complexity. We begin to see the emergence of larger public buildings, not just temples, but also what appear to be administrative structures. This suggests a developing social hierarchy, with certain individuals or groups, t.a. king on leadership roles. Perhaps these were religious leaders, or perhaps those who managed the crucial irrigation systems, ensuring the equitable distribution of water, a vital resource in this arid land. The management of these communal projects would have required cooperation on an unprecedented scale, laying the groundwork for more sophisticated forms of governance. The transition from small villages to larger, more organized settlements was not a sudden leap, but a gradual, organic process. As populations increased due to agricultural surpluses, the need for more sophisticated social structures became apparent. Decisions had to be made about land use, water allocation, and the storage of surplus goods. This necessity likely spurred the development of early forms of communal leadership and rudimentary administrative systems. Imagine the bustling activity around a central granary, where harvested crops were stored, or the collaborative effort involved in digging and maintaining a new irrigation canal. These shared endeavors fostered a sense of community and interdependence. One lesser-known detail from the Ubaid period is the discovery of what appear to be early forms of seals. These small, often intricately carved objects, typically made of stone, were used to impress designs onto clay. While not as sophisticated as the later cylinder seals of the Sumerians, these early stamp seals suggest a growing need for identifying ownership or validating transactions. Perhaps they were used to mark containers of grain or to signify the authority of an individual. This simple act of impressing a unique mark onto a piece of clay hints at the burgeoning concepts of property, accountability, and perhaps even early forms of record-keeping, all crucial precursors to the development of writing. The climate of Mesopotamia played a pivotal role in shaping these early societies. The hot, dry summers and the annual, often unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates presented both challenges and opportunities. The floods, while destructive if uncontrolled, brought fertile silt that replenished the soil, making intensive agriculture possible. This dynamic environment fostered ingenuity and resilience. The Ubaid people were constantly adapting, learning to read the subtle signs of the rivers and developing technologies to manage the flow of water. Their survival depended on a deep understanding of their natural surroundings and a willingness to innovate. The very landscape of the southern Mesopotamian plain, with its flat, open vistas, might have also influenced the development of these early communities. Unlike mountainous regions that might foster isolated, self-sufficient villages, the open plain encouraged connectivity. Travel by river was relatively easy, facilitating trade and the spread of ideas. This interconnectedness is perhaps why we see such a consistent Ubaid cultural footprint across a wide area. Imagine the small boats, laden with goods, silently gliding along the ancient waterways, carrying not just pottery and grains, but also stories, beliefs, and innovations from one settlement to another. The end of the Ubaid period, around 4100 BCE, is not marked by a catastrophic event, but rather by a gradual transition into what archaeologists call the Uruk period, a time of even greater urbanization and the true birth of cities. The foundations laid by the Ubaid people, the development of irrigation, the growth of larger settlements, the beginnings of social stratification, and the shared cultural practices were the essential building blocks for the monumental changes that were to come. They transformed a landscape of scattered agriculturalists into a region poised for the emergence of the world's first true urban centers, with all the complexities and wonders that entailed. The quiet persistence of the Ubaid people, their patient mastery of their environment, and their communal spirit truly set the stage for the dazzling civilizations that would follow. Their legacy is etched not in grand monuments, but in the very soil of Mesopotamia, in the layers of ancient settlements that whisper tales of humanity's earliest steps towards civilization. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. From the scattered villages that dotted the Mesopotamian plain, a new form of human settlement began to emerge, one that would redefine existence itself. This was Uruk, not merely a larger collection of homes, but a city in every sense of the word, a vibrant, sprawling organism of stone, mud brick, and human ingenuity. By the late 4th millennium BCE, Uruk had grown to an astonishing size, perhaps encompassing an area of 5.5 square kilometers, and sheltering a population that some scholars estimate reached between 40,000 and 50,000 souls. Imagine the sheer scale of it, a metropolis arising from the Fertile Crescent, its walls, according to later legends, built by the mythical king Gilgamesh himself, stretching for miles, enclosing a world of temples, workshops, and bustling streets. The heart of Uruk pulsed around its sacred precincts, particularly the Eanna district, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, and the Kulaba district, home to the sky god An. Here, massive ziggurats, towering platforms topped with temples, began to pierce the Mesopotamian sky. The White Temple, perched atop its elevated terrace in the Kulaba precinct, would have gleamed under the desert sun, a beacon visible for miles, symbolizing the city's profound connection to the divine. These were not simple shrines. They were monumental feats of engineering, requiring immense organization, labor, and a shared vision. The very act of building them fostered a sense of collective identity, binding the diverse inhabitants of Uruk into a cohesive whole, all working towards a common sacred purpose. This explosion of urban life brought with it unprecedented challenges and opportunities. Managing such a large and diverse population, coordinating the construction of colossal public works, and distributing resources efficiently demanded new systems of administration. And from this necessity, one of humanity's most profound inventions was born: writing. Initially, it was not for poetry or grand narratives, but for the mundane yet vital tasks of accounting and record-keeping. The earliest forms, known as proto-cuneiform, were pictographic, simple drawings representing objects or ideas. A head of cattle, a sheaf of grain, a jar of oil. These were the first symbols etched into moist clay tablets. These early tablets, unearthed in the thousands from Uruk's temple archives, reveal a society obsessed with inventory. How many sheep were delivered to the temple? How much barley was distributed to workers? Who owed what to whom? Over time, these pictograms evolved. They became more abstract, stylized into wedge-shaped marks, impressed into clay with a reed stylus. This was cuneiform, meaning wedge-shaped, a revolutionary system that could represent not just objects, but sounds and concepts. It allowed for a far more nuanced and complex record of information, moving beyond simple lists to administrative decrees, legal codes, and eventually, literature. The invention of writing was not a sudden flash of genius by one individual, but a gradual, organic development driven by the practical demands of a complex urban economy. It allowed for the accumulation and transmission of knowledge across generations, laying the groundwork for all future intellectual endeavors. Imagine the scribes, hunched over their clay tablets, their hands shaping the soft earth into enduring records, their work a silent testament to the dawning of a new era of human communication. The rise of Uruk also saw the consolidation of power in the hands of a priestly elite, who managed the vast temple estates and controlled much of the city's economic life. The temples were not just places of worship. They were immense economic engines, owning land, livestock, and workshops, employing large numbers of people. The surplus wealth generated by agriculture and craft production flowed into the temple coffers, which in turn funded public works and supported the ruling class. This intricate relationship between religion, economy, and governance was characteristic of early Mesopotamian cities. The ruler, often depicted as a priest-king, was seen as the intermediary between the gods and humanity, responsible for the city's prosperity and divine favor. The Uruk period also witnessed significant technological advancements. The potter's wheel, though invented earlier, saw widespread adoption and refinement, leading to mass production of standardized pottery, essential for storing and transporting goods in a large urban center. Metallurgy advanced, with copper and bronze becoming more common for tools and weapons, though stone remained prevalent. Perhaps one of the most overlooked yet crucial innovations was the cylinder seal. These small, intricately carved stone cylinders, when rolled over wet clay, left a continuous impression, acting as a signature or a mark of ownership. They were ubiquitous in Uruk, found on everything from administrative documents to sealed jars, reflecting a society where individual accountability and property rights were becoming increasingly important. The imagery on these seals often depicted scenes of daily life, mythological narratives, or religious rituals, offering a fascinating glimpse into the Uruk worldview. The expansion of Uruk's influence was not confined to its city walls. Archaeological evidence suggests a vast network of trade routes extending from Uruk, reaching as far as Anatolia for copper and timber, and the Persian Gulf for exotic stones and shells. The city became a hub of exchange, drawing in resources from distant lands and disseminating its own manufactured goods and cultural influence. This widespread interaction, however, also brought challenges. Historians still debate the exact nature of Uruk's relationship with its surrounding settlements. Was it a benevolent mother city, fostering development in its hinterland, or a dominant imperial power, extracting resources and labor from its neighbors? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex tapestry of alliances, dependencies, and occasional conflicts. The legacy of Uruk is profound. It was the blueprint for future cities, demonstrating the viability of large-scale urban living. It pioneered the administrative structures necessary to manage complex societies, and most importantly, it gave the world writing, a tool that would transform human consciousness and history. The shift from scattered agrarian communities to densely populated urban centers like Uruk marked a fundamental change in human organization, a move towards greater specialization, hierarchy, and collective endeavor. The very rhythm of life accelerated within its walls, a symphony of commerce, craft, and devotion. Consider the Uruk vase, a magnificent alabaster vessel dating to around 3200 to 3000 BCE, discovered in the Iana precinct. Its 4 registers depict a procession, from the bounty of the natural world at the bottom, through nude male figures bearing offerings, to a priest-king presenting gifts to the goddess Inanna at the top. This object is not merely beautiful, it is a profound narrative, illustrating the cosmic order as understood by the people of Uruk. The fertility of the land, the labor of humanity, and the divine blessing channeled through the ruler. It speaks of a sophisticated worldview, where every aspect of life was interwoven with the sacred. Yet, even in its grandeur, Uruk was not immune to the forces of change. Around 3000 BCE, its prominence began to wane, giving way to other rising city-states in Mesopotamia, such as Ur and Kish. The reasons for this decline are complex and multifaceted. Perhaps environmental shifts, like changes in the course of the Euphrates River, affected its agricultural base. Perhaps internal strife or external pressures from rival powers played a role. Or perhaps, like all great civilizations, it simply reached a natural peak before the pendulum of power swung elsewhere. The exact sequence of events remains a subject of ongoing archaeological and historical inquiry, but the seeds Uruk had sown had taken root across the Mesopotamian plain. The idea of the city, the practice of writing, the principles of monumental architecture, and the rudiments of bureaucracy, these innovations did not disappear with Uruk's decline. Instead, they spread, adapted, and evolved in the hands of successive civilizations. The Sumerians, a people whose language and culture dominated southern Mesopotamia, built upon Uruk's foundations, creating a vibrant tapestry of independent city-states, each with its own patron deity, its own ruling dynasty, and its own unique character. These city-states, though sharing a common cultural heritage, were often in competition, vying for control over fertile land, trade routes, and water resources. This period, often called the Early Dynastic period, circa 2900 to 2350 BCE, saw the emergence of powerful kings who ruled not just as priests, but as military leaders. The walls that protected cities became increasingly important, and the art of warfare became more organized. Yet, even amidst conflict, there was a shared understanding of what it meant to be Mesopotamian, a common pantheon of gods, a similar legal framework, and the enduring legacy of cuneiform writing. Life in these early city-states was a delicate balance between the sacred and the mundane. The temple remained central, a towering ziggurat dominating the skyline, surrounded by the homes of ordinary citizens, narrow winding streets, and bustling marketplaces. Agriculture was the bedrock of the economy, with vast irrigation networks channeling the life-giving waters of the Tigris and Euphrates to fields of barley, wheat, and dates. Craftspeople produced an astonishing array of goods, from intricate jewelry to sturdy tools, while merchants facilitated trade, bringing in exotic materials from distant lands. The concept of law and order also began to formalize during this period, while comprehensive legal codes like that of Hammurabi would come much later. Early forms of legal precedent and dispute resolution were already in place, often overseen by temple authorities or city elders. Justice, though perhaps harsh by modern standards, aimed to maintain social cohesion and protect property rights. This emphasis on written law, a direct descendant of Uruk's administrative innovations, highlights the growing complexity and formalization of Mesopotamian society. The stories of these early kings, often embellished with mythical elements, were recorded on clay tablets, providing glimpses into their reigns. Figures like Mesalim of Kish or Ur-Nanshe of Lagash emerge from the mists of time, their names inscribed on foundation cones or votive offerings. These inscriptions, though brief, speak of temple building, military victories, and the maintenance of order, painting a picture of rulers striving to embody the ideals of their age. And through it all, the rivers flowed, shaping the landscape, nurturing the land, and serving as arteries of commerce. The Tigris, swift and unpredictable, and the Euphrates, slower and more meandering, were the lifeblood of Mesopotamia, their annual floods both a blessing and a curse. Managing these waters, building and maintaining the intricate irrigation systems, was a constant challenge, requiring immense cooperation and organization. This shared endeavor fostered a unique relationship between humanity and nature, a recognition of both the bounty and the formidable power of the natural world. The Mesopotamian worldview was deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the rivers, the cycles of the seasons, and the unpredictable forces of the divine. The whispers of the wind through the date palms, the shimmering heat rising from the irrigated fields, the distant calls of shepherds. These were the sounds and sensations that defined life in the burgeoning urban centers, a legacy born from the monumental vision of Uruk. From the Fertile Crescent's heart, a new chapter unfolded, not as a unified kingdom, but as a mosaic of independent city-states, each a vibrant, self-contained world humming with life and ambition. This was the early dynastic period, roughly spanning from 2900 to 2350 BCE, a time when the very concept of urban living matured and diversified. Imagine a landscape dotted with walled cities, each rising from the alluvial plains like an island. Its ziggurat, a beacon reaching for the heavens, its fields stretching outwards like green robes. These were not mere settlements. They were complex societies, each with its own patron deity, its own ruling elite, and its own distinct identity. Uruk, still a giant, continued to thrive, but now alongside it stood Kish, Lagash, Umma, Ur, Nippur, and many others, each vying for influence, resources, and sometimes outright dominance. The proliferation of these city-states was a natural outgrowth of the agricultural surplus and population density that had characterized the Uruk period. As communities grew, they developed distinct leadership structures and economic interests, fostering a sense of local pride and autonomy. Within the high walls of these cities, life was meticulously organized. At the apex of the social pyramid stood the Ensi or Lugal, titles that often translated to city ruler or king. The Ensi was typically a priestly figure, believed to be the chosen steward of the city's patron god, responsible for maintaining divine favor and overseeing the city's religious life. The Lugal, on the other hand, often emerged during times of war, a military leader who might then consolidate power and establish a dynastic line. Historians still debate the precise relationship between these two titles and whether they represented distinct offices or evolving roles of a single ruler. Perhaps the distinction was fluid, adapting to the needs of the time, with spiritual authority often intertwined with temporal power. Beneath the ruler, a complex bureaucracy managed the city's affairs. Scribes, trained in the intricate art of cuneiform, meticulously recorded everything from temple offerings to grain harvests, from legal contracts to diplomatic correspondence. These administrative texts, etched onto clay tablets, provide an invaluable window into the daily lives and economic structures of these ancient cities. We know, for instance, that the city of Lagash, during the reign of Uruk-agina, circa 2350 BCE, enacted reforms to curb corruption and protect the common people from exploitation by temple officials and powerful elites, a testament to the evolving understanding of governance and justice. The heart of each city-state was its temple complex, a sprawling precinct dedicated to the patron deity. These temples were not just places of worship, they were economic powerhouses, owning vast tracts of land, employing numerous laborers, and serving as centers for redistribution of goods. The ziggurat, a stepped pyramid, dominated the skyline, its terraces perhaps adorned with gardens, its summit a sacred space where priests communed with the divine. The air around these temples would have been thick with the scent of incense, the murmur of prayers, and the bustle of daily activity, a constant reminder of the god's presence in every aspect of life. Beyond the temple, residential quarters sprawled. A maze of mud brick houses, narrow alleys, and bustling marketplaces. Craftsmen plied their trades: potters, weavers, metalworkers, jewelers, their skills transforming raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. Farmers, living within the city walls or in surrounding villages, tended the fields of barley and wheat, their lives inextricably linked to the rhythms of the Tigris and Euphrates, whose annual floods brought both life-giving silt and potential devastation. The sounds of their work, the clatter of looms, the clang of hammers, the lowing of cattle, would have blended into the constant hum of urban existence. But this vibrant tapestry of city-states was also marked by an almost ceaseless state of conflict. The fertile lands, the control of irrigation canals, access to trade routes, and even religious prestige fueled constant rivalries. Borders were fluid, and alliances shifted like desert sands. Imagine the tension in the air, the constant vigilance required, as each city fortified its walls, trained its soldiers, and prepared for the inevitable clash. One of the most enduring symbols of this era of conflict is the Standard of Ur, a remarkable mosaic discovered in the royal tombs of Ur, dating to approximately 2600 to 2400 BCE. One side depicts scenes of peace and prosperity, with banquets and processions, while the other vividly portrays the brutal realities of war: chariots trampling enemies, foot soldiers marching in formation, and captives being led away. It is a stark, visual testament to the dual nature of life in these early cities. Periods of creative flourishing interspersed with destructive warfare. Battles were often fought over control of agricultural land or water resources. The very existence of a city depended on its ability to feed its population, and a successful raid on an enemy's fields could cripple them. The famous conflict between Lagash and Umma, two neighboring city-states, is a prime example. For generations, these two cities squabbled over a fertile border region known as the Guadena, or Edge of the Plain. Inscriptions from Lagash detail a long history of border disputes, broken treaties, and military campaigns. One ruler of Lagash, Ianadam, boasted of his victories over Umma, even erecting a stele, the Stele of the Vultures, to commemorate his triumph, depicting him leading his phalanx of soldiers over the bodies of his fallen enemies. This stele, though fragmented, provides a rare visual record of Sumerian military tactics and the ferocity of their engagements. These wars were not always about outright conquest. Often, the goal was to extract tribute, to assert dominance, or to secure a strategic advantage. A defeated city might be forced to pay reparations, to cede territory, or to acknowledge the suzerainty of the victor. The cycle of conflict and temporary peace was relentless, shaping the political landscape and fostering a warrior ethos among the ruling elites. The military organization of these city-states was surprisingly sophisticated for their time. Sumerian armies consisted of infantry armed with spears, shields, and copper axes, often fighting in close formation, similar to a phalanx. Chariots pulled by donkeys, horses were not yet common in Mesopotamia, were also employed, serving as mobile platforms for archers or javelin throwers. While their effectiveness in open battle is debated, they certainly would have been a terrifying sight to an opposing force, a symbol of power and technological advancement. Beyond the grand narratives of kings and battles, the lives of ordinary people were profoundly affected by this constant state of flux. The threat of invasion meant that city walls were not just symbolic, they were vital defenses, maintained and strengthened by communal labor. Young men were conscripted into armies, and families faced the constant anxiety of their loved ones going to war. Trade routes could be disrupted, harvests destroyed, and entire communities displaced by the shifting tides of conflict. Yet, amidst this uncertainty, life continued. Festivals were celebrated, children were born and raised, and the rhythms of agriculture and craftsmanship persisted. One fascinating, yet often overlooked, aspect of this period is the role of the priestess. In some city-states, particularly Uruk, a high priestess, often a royal daughter, held immense religious and political power, serving as the embodiment of the city's patron goddess. Enheduanna, the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, who would come to dominate the later part of this era, is the most famous example. She was not only the high priestess of the moon god Nana in Ur, but also a prolific poet, whose hymns and literary works are among the earliest known writings attributed to a specific author. Her existence highlights the complex interplay of religious, political, and cultural power in these early societies, and the surprising prominence of women in certain influential roles. The constant warfare, however, also had a unifying, albeit brutal, effect. It led to the development of more centralized authority within each city-state, as rulers needed to mobilize resources and manpower effectively. It spurred innovation in military technology and defensive architecture, and perhaps most significantly, it laid the groundwork for the eventual emergence of larger, more unified kingdoms. The idea of a single ruler dominating multiple city-states, though still nascent, was beginning to take root in the minds of ambitious leaders. The early dynastic period, therefore, was a crucible of civilization. It was a time of immense creativity, marked by stunning artistic achievements, the refinement of writing, and the development of sophisticated administrative systems. But it was also an era of intense competition and violence, where the struggle for survival and supremacy shaped the destiny of countless individuals and entire communities. The legacy of these independent city-states, their triumphs and their conflicts, would echo through the millennia, laying the foundational stones for the empires that would rise and fall on the Mesopotamian plains. The dust of their battles settled, but the stories of their struggles and their ingenuity were etched into the very fabric of the land, waiting to be rediscovered by future generations. Perhaps the very air above the ruins of Umma and Lagash still carries the faint echoes of their ancient rivalry, a whisper of a time when cities were islands in a sea of shifting power. The Fertile Crescent, a land cradled by the Tigris and Euphrates, had long been a mosaic of independent city-states, each with its own patron deity, its own ziggurat reaching for the heavens, and its own king, often vying for dominance. For centuries, Sumerian culture had flourished, its innovations spreading like ripples across the ancient world. Yet, the vision of a unified land, a single dominion stretching from the lower sea to the upper sea, remained an elusive dream. It was a dream that would soon find its champion in a figure shrouded in both legend and historical fact, Sargon of Akkad. His origins, like many great figures of antiquity, are veiled in myth. The Sargon legend, a text written centuries after his reign, paints a dramatic picture. A humble gardener, found in a basket on the river, raised by a common man, destined for greatness. This narrative, echoing later tales like that of Moses, suggests a deliberate effort to imbue his rise with divine favor and destiny, perhaps to legitimize his unprecedented claim to power. What is certain, however, is that Sargon emerged from the city of Kish, a powerful Sumerian center, not as a hereditary king, but as a man who seized opportunity through sheer force of will and military acumen. He was, by all accounts, a brilliant strategist, a leader who understood the power of organization and the swift, decisive strike. Sargon's ambition was not merely to conquer, but to unify. He began by consolidating his power in Kish, then turned his gaze southward, towards the ancient Sumerian cities. One by one, Uruk, Lagash, and Umma, cities that had known centuries of independent rule, fell before his disciplined army. He did not merely defeat their armies, he dismantled their traditional power structures, installing his own loyal governors, often drawn from his family or trusted inner circle. This was a radical departure from previous conquests, which often involved tribute and nominal submission, but allowed local rulers to retain much of their authority. Sargon's vision was of a centralized state, a true empire, where power flowed from a single supreme authority. He established his new capital at Akkad, a city whose exact location remains one of the enduring mysteries of Mesopotamian archaeology. Despite extensive excavations, the ruins of Akkad have never been definitively identified, leading some historians to speculate that it might have been built on a site that has since been completely eroded or lies beneath modern settlements. Perhaps its very elusiveness adds to the mystique of Sargon's reign, a city born of ambition, rising swiftly to prominence and then vanishing, leaving only its name whispered through the annals of time. From this unseen center, Sargon launched campaigns that would forever alter the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. His armies marched west, reaching the Mediterranean Sea, and east into Elam, creating an empire that stretched further than any before it. The sheer scale of his conquests was breathtaking, and for the first time, a single ruler controlled a vast territory, ushering in the age of empires. To maintain control over such a sprawling domain, Sargon implemented innovative administrative techniques. He established a professional standing army, loyal only to him, rather than relying on levies from individual city-states. This army, well-trained and equipped, was a formidable instrument of imperial power. He also standardized weights and measures, facilitated long-distance trade, and fostered a sense of common identity across his diverse territories. Though this was likely more through coercion than genuine cultural assimilation, the Akkadian language, a Semitic tongue, began to gain prominence alongside Sumerian, reflecting the new ruling elite. Sargon even appointed his daughter, Enheduanna, as the high priestess of the moon god Nanna in a shrewd move that intertwined religious authority with political power and showcase the importance of religious legitimacy in his rule. Enheduanna herself was a remarkable figure, often considered the world's first author whose name is known, her hymns and poems offering a rare glimpse into the spiritual and intellectual life of the Akkadian court. Sargon's reign, lasting for over 5 decades, marked a golden age for the Akkadian Empire. Trade flourished, art and literature saw new forms emerge, blending Sumerian traditions with Akkadian sensibilities. The famous bronze head of an Akkadian ruler, often attributed to Sargon himself, showcases a new level of artistic sophistication and realism, a powerful depiction of regal authority and idealized kingship. Yet, even during his lifetime, the vastness of his empire presented inherent challenges. Rebellions were frequent, particularly in the later years of his reign, as conquered peoples chafed under Akkadian rule. The very act of unifying such diverse cultures under a single banner created tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Upon Sargon's death, around 2279 BCE, the empire faced its first true test of succession. His sons, Rimush and Manishtushu, ruled briefly, each struggling to maintain the integrity of their father's creation against a tide of renewed uprisings. The constant need for military campaigns to suppress revolts drained resources and manpower. It was Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, who would truly inherit and, for a time, surpass his grandfather's legacy. Naram-Sin, whose name means beloved of Sin, the moon god, was an equally formidable ruler and military commander. He consolidated the empire, expanded its borders even further, and famously declared himself king of the four quarters of the world, a title that asserted universal dominion, unprecedented in its ambition. Naram-Sin even went a step further than Sargon, deifying himself during his lifetime, a practice more common among later pharaohs of Egypt than among Mesopotamian kings. This self-deification, reflected in his iconography where he wears the horned crown traditionally reserved for deities, was a bold assertion of divine right and absolute power. His victory stele, a magnificent piece of relief sculpture, depicts him as a towering, godlike figure, trampling his enemies, ascending a mountain towards celestial bodies, a vivid testament to his imperial might and divine favor. Under Naram-Sin, the Akkadian Empire reached its zenith, a sprawling entity that controlled vast trade routes and commanded immense resources. However, the very ambition that propelled Naram-Sin to such heights may have also sown the seeds of the empire's eventual decline. The constant warfare, the relentless expansion, and the centralized, authoritarian rule likely created resentment among the conquered populations and strained the empire's administrative capacity. The Curse of Akkad, a later Sumerian literary text, offers a poignant, albeit biased account of the empire's downfall, attributing it to Naram-Sin's sacrilegious act of plundering the Ekkur, the temple of Enlil in Nippur. While likely a retrospective justification for the empire's collapse, this text highlights the deep-seated belief that divine displeasure could bring even the mightiest empires to their knees. The true causes of the Akkadian Empire's collapse, around 2154 BCE, are a complex tapestry of internal strife, external pressures, and potentially environmental factors. The Gutians, a nomadic people from the Zagros Mountains to the east, are often cited as the primary external force. Their raids, initially sporadic, grew in intensity and frequency, gradually weakening the empire's periphery. The Gutian period is often described as a dark age, a time of fragmentation and instability, where the centralized authority of Akkad was replaced by a more chaotic landscape of smaller warring states. But the Gutians alone may not have been enough to bring down such a powerful entity. Historians still debate the precise mole of climate change in the empire's demise. Recent archaeological and paleoclimatological research suggests a severe, widespread drought occurred around 2200 BCE, coinciding with the empire's later stages. This prolonged period of aridity would have devastated agricultural yields, leading to widespread famine, social unrest, and mass migrations. The fragile network of irrigation canals, so vital to Mesopotamian agriculture, would have struggled to cope with diminished water levels in the Tigris and Euphrates. Such environmental stress could have exacerbated existing internal weaknesses, making the empire more vulnerable to external incursions and internal rebellions. Perhaps the very land that had nurtured Sargon's ambition ultimately turned against his successors, its lifeblood, the rivers, dwindling to a trickle. The legacy of the Akkadian Empire, despite its relatively short lifespan of about 150 years, was profound. Sargon's creation of the first true empire set a precedent for future civilizations, demonstrating the possibility of unifying vast territories under a single rule. The administrative innovations, the professional army, the concept of a universal king, and the artistic and literary flourishing under Akkadian rule left an indelible mark on Mesopotamian culture. Even after its collapse, the memory of Akkad persisted, a powerful ideal of centralized power and imperial glory that later rulers, like the kings of Ur-III and Hammurabi of Babylon, would strive to emulate. The Akkadian language continued to be used for centuries as a lingua franca across the Near East, a testament to its cultural influence. The fall of Akkad did not mean the end of civilization in Mesopotamia. Rather, it ushered in a period of transition and renewal. The Sumerian city-states, which had been subjugated by Sargon, experienced a resurgence, leading to what is known as the Neo-Sumerian Renaissance, particularly under the Third Dynasty of Ur. This period saw a renewed emphasis on Sumerian language, literature, and religious traditions, almost as if the land was exhaling a collective sigh of relief, returning to its ancient roots after the imperial interlude. Yet the seed of empire had been planted. The vision of a unified land, however fleetingly realized by Sargon and Naram-Sin, would continue to inspire future conquerors and builders of vast dominions, echoing through the millennia, a whisper of power and ambition carried on the desert winds. The very idea of a king of the four quarters, once a radical claim, would become a recurring motif in the aspirations of subsequent rulers, a testament to the enduring impact of Akkad's brief but brilliant reign. The silent ruins of cities, some still hidden beneath the sands, hold the untold stories of those who lived and died under the first great empire, their dreams and struggles etched into the very fabric of time. The shadow of Akkad, though long and influential, eventually receded, leaving a complex tapestry of city-states and regional powers vying for supremacy. For a time, Mesopotamia found itself in a fragmented state, a mosaic of independent rulers and shifting alliances. Yet from this intricate landscape, a new power began to coalesce, one that would usher in a remarkable period of Sumerian resurgence, a final, brilliant chapter for a civilization that had laid the very foundations of urban life. This was the era of the Third Dynasty of Ur, often simply called Ur-III, a period that saw the re-establishment of a centralized Sumerian empire and the flourishing of an administrative and economic system of unparalleled sophistication for its time. The precise circumstances of Ur's rise to prominence are still debated among scholars. Some suggest a gradual accumulation of power, a slow reassertion of Sumerian identity after centuries under Semitic rule. Others point to the decline of the Gutian invaders, who had briefly held sway after the fall of Akkad, as creating a power vacuum that Ur was uniquely positioned to fill. What is clear is that around 2112 BCE, a ruler named Ur-Nama ascended to the throne of Ur, laying the groundwork for what would become a formidable and highly organized state. He presented himself not as a conqueror in the Akkadian mold, but as a restorer of Sumerian traditions, a unifier of the disparate city-states under the benevolent gaze of the moon god Nana, the patron deity of Ur. Ur-Nama's reign marked a pivotal moment. He embarked on ambitious building projects, restoring temples and ziggurats that had fallen into disrepair. Most famously, the Great Ziggurat of Ur, whose massive, stepped platform still dominates the ancient city's ruins. These monumental constructions were not merely acts of piety. They were powerful symbols of renewed Sumerian strength and centralized authority, visible declarations of Ur's preeminence. He also promulgated the earliest known law code, predating Hammurabi's by several centuries. While only fragments of Ur-Nama's code survive, they reveal a concern for justice, property rights, and the protection of the vulnerable, reflecting a society striving for order and equity. Imagine the scribes, hunched over clay tablets, meticulously inscribing these laws, their reed styluses scratching out cuneiform symbols that would govern the lives of thousands. Perhaps the very act of codifying laws, of making them accessible and uniform, was a revolutionary concept in itself, a testament to the growing complexity of their society. The true zenith of the Ur-3 state, however, was reached under Ur-Namma's son, Shulgi, who ruled for an astonishing 48 years, c. 2094 to 2047 BCE. Shulgi was a figure of immense energy and vision, a true empire builder who consolidated and expanded his father's legacy. He transformed the Ur-3 state into a highly centralized, bureaucratic machine, perhaps the most complex administrative system the world had yet seen. This was an empire built on meticulous record-keeping, a vast network of scribes, administrators, and officials who managed every aspect of the state's economy and resources. At the heart of this system was the concept of the Bala, a sophisticated system of taxation and redistribution. Each province or city-state was required to contribute a certain quota of goods, grain, livestock, textiles, labor, to the central treasury at Ur. These goods were then redistributed to support the royal court, the military, temple complexes, and a vast army of laborers engaged in state projects. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, meticulously inscribed with administrative records, have been unearthed from Ur-3 sites, providing an unparalleled glimpse into the daily workings of this ancient economy. These tablets detail everything from the allocation of barley rations to workers, to the movement of vast herds of cattle, to the production of textiles in state Ru. In workshops, imagine a bustling administrative center, perhaps a large building filled with scribes, their fingers stained with clay, as they recorded every transaction, every delivery, every expenditure. The air would have been thick with the scent of damp earth and the quiet scratch of styluses. Shulgi also implemented a standardized calendar, a uniform system of weights and measures, and even a unified curriculum for scribal schools. These measures were designed to integrate the various provinces more tightly into the central administration and to ensure consistency across the empire. He established a professional army loyal to the king and undertook military campaigns to secure the empire's borders, particularly against incursions from the Elamites to the east and the Amorites from the western deserts. The image of Shulgi, the king, as a divine figure, a powerful and benevolent shepherd of his people, was carefully cultivated. He even deified himself during his lifetime, a practice that had roots in Akkadian tradition, but was fully embraced and formalized during the Ur-3 period. This self-deification served to elevate the king's authority, placing him above mortal challenge and reinforcing the centralized nature of the state. The Ur-3 Empire was characterized by an unprecedented level of control over its resources and population. Land was largely owned by the state or the temples, and agricultural production was meticulously managed. Large state farms, worked by a combination of free laborers, conscripted citizens, and even enslaved individuals, produced vast quantities of grain and other foodstuffs. The surplus was then collected and redistributed through the Bala system. This economic model, while highly efficient, also suggests a society with limited individual autonomy, where the state played a pervasive role in the lives of its citizens. The concept of private property, while not entirely absent, was certainly overshadowed by the overarching control of the central administration. Beyond the economic and administrative innovations, the Ur-3 period also witnessed a flourishing of Sumerian literature and art. Many of the great Sumerian literary compositions, such as the epic tales of Gilgamesh or the laments for the destruction of cities, were either composed or meticulously copied and preserved during this era. Scribes were not just bureaucrats. they were also poets and scholars, dedicated to preserving and transmitting their cultural heritage. The art of the period, while less overtly militaristic than Akkadian art, was characterized by a serene elegance, with a focus on divine figures and pious rulers. The famous Gudea statues, though predating Ur-III slightly, embody this aesthetic, depicting rulers in a posture of humble devotion, their muscles subtly defined, their faces serene. However, even the most meticulously organized empires carry the seeds of their own decline. The very centralization that was Ur-III's strength also made it vulnerable. The immense administrative burden, the constant need to manage vast resources, and a sprawling bureaucracy placed immense strain on the system. Moreover, the empire faced increasing external pressures. The Amorites, nomadic tribes from the western deserts, became an ever-present threat, their incursions growing bolder and more frequent. The construction of a massive defensive wall, known as the Wall of Martu being the Sumerian term for Amorites, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, speaks to the seriousness of this threat. Imagine the sheer scale of such an undertaking, the testament to both the empire's power and its growing anxiety. Internal dissent also played a role. While the Bala system efficiently channeled resources to the center, it also placed a heavy burden on the provinces, who resented the constant demands from Ur. The loyalty of regional governors, often drawn from local elites, was not always assured. The later kings of Ur-III, particularly Ibis-Sin, struggled to maintain control over the vast empire. Provincial governors began to act more independently, diverting resources and even declaring their autonomy. The empire began to fragment, not with a single catastrophic blow, but with a slow, agonizing unraveling, like a meticulously woven tapestry, slowly coming apart, thread by thread. The final blow came from the east. The Elamites, long-standing rivals of Mesopotamia, launched a devastating invasion around 2004 BCE. The weakened Ur-III state, beset by internal strife and Amorite incursions, could not withstand the onslaught. The city of Ur, once the magnificent heart of the empire, was sacked and destroyed. The lament for the destruction of Ur, a poignant Sumerian literary composition, describes the horror of the event. Its people, not potsherds, were scattered. Its walls were breached. Ur is destroyed. Bitter is its fate. This was not just the fall of a city. It was the end of a long and glorious chapter of Sumerian civilization. The last great Sumerian empire had fallen, and with its demise, the political dominance of the Sumerian language and culture began to wane, giving way to the ascendancy of Semitic-speaking peoples. Yet, the legacy of Ur-III endured. Its administrative innovations, its legal principles, its literary traditions, and its architectural achievements profoundly influenced subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations, particularly the Old Babylonian period that would follow. The very concept of a centralized, bureaucratic state, managed through meticulous record-keeping and a uniform legal system, found its roots in the sophisticated machinery of Ur-III. Even the idea of a king as a divine shepherd, responsible for the welfare of his people, was a concept that resonated through later Mesopotamian kingships. The fall of Ur, however, marked a significant turning point. While Sumerian culture and language would continue to be revered and studied by scribes for centuries, it ceased to be the dominant political force. The stage was now set for new actors to emerge, new empires to rise and fall. But the foundations upon which they would build had been laid, layer by layer, by the Sumerians. From their earliest city-states to to the grand, if fleeting, empire of Ur-3. The echoes of their meticulous administration, their grand ziggurats, and their poignant laments would whisper through the sands of time, a testament to a civilization that truly shaped the course of human history. The meticulous records of Ur-3, thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, continue to offer scholars today an unparalleled window into the workings of a complex ancient society. These small, unassuming pieces of baked earth hold within them the detailed accounts of an empire, from the distribution of grain to the movement of armies, allowing us to reconstruct a world that flourished and then faded, leaving behind only these silent, eloquent witnesses. The grand ziggurat of Ur, once a beacon of empire, slowly crumbled into the dust, its terraced heights no longer reaching for the moon as they once did. With the collapse of the Ur-3 dynasty around 2000 BCE, Mesopotamia entered a period of fragmentation, a mosaic of independent city-states, each vying for supremacy. The centralized authority that had bound Sumer and Akkad for a century dissolved, and new players emerged from the shadows of the old order. Among them, a city nestled by the Euphrates, still relatively obscure, began to stir: Babylon. For a time, the landscape was dominated by shifting alliances and rivalries. Cities like Isin and Larsa rose to prominence, their kings claiming the mantle of Ur, attempting to restore a semblance of the old imperial glory. They built temples, dug canals, and issued laws, yet none could replicate the vast administrative reach of Ur-3. It was a period of intense cultural exchange, too. As Amorite tribes, Semitic peoples from the western deserts, increasingly settled within Mesopotamia, adopting its customs, language, and writing. Their presence introduced new dynamics, new names, and eventually new royal lines. One such Amorite dynasty would eventually establish itself in Babylon, a city whose name, Bab-Ili, meant Gate of God. For generations, Babylon remained a minor power, overshadowed by its more formidable neighbors. But then, around 1792 BCE, a king ascended its throne who would forever alter the course of Mesopotamian history: Hammurabi. He inherited a small kingdom, but possessed a vision far grander than his predecessors. Hammurabi was a meticulous administrator, a shrewd diplomat, and a formidable military strategist. His reign began with careful consolidation, forging alliances and securing his borders, patiently building his strength while his rivals exhausted themselves in petty conflicts. His early years were marked by a focus on internal development. He oversaw extensive irrigation projects, ensuring the fertility of his lands and the prosperity of his people. He meticulously organized his administration, appointing governors and judges, laying the groundwork for a stable and efficient state. But Hammurabi understood that true power lay not just in internal strength, but in external dominance. Over the next 3 decades, he embarked on a series of calculated military campaigns, one by one bringing the powerful city-states of Mesopotamia under his control. Larsa, his most formidable rival, fell after a long and arduous siege. Mari, a powerful kingdom on the Middle Euphrates, known for its magnificent palace and extensive archives, also succumbed to his might. The echoes of its vibrant life, its diplomatic letters and economic records, still whisper from the clay tablets unearthed centuries later, offering a vivid glimpse into the intricate politics of the era. By the end of his reign, Hammurabi had forged an empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf to the upper reaches of the Tigris and Euphrates, a vast realm unified under the banner of Babylon. This was not merely a conquest, it was a transformation. Hammurabi's most enduring legacy, perhaps even more so than his military victories, was his comprehensive legal code, inscribed on a towering diorite stele, now famously housed in the Louvre Museum. The Code of Hammurabi is one of the earliest and most complete written legal codes from antiquity. It laid out laws governing everything from property rights and trade to family matters and criminal offenses, establishing a framework for justice and order across his vast empire. The stele depicts Hammurabi receiving the laws from Shamash, the sun god and god of justice, emphasizing the divine sanction of his rule. The famous principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, lex talionis, is often associated with this code, though its application was nuanced and varied depending on the social status of those involved. The Code of Hammurabi was not simply a election of laws. It was a statement of imperial authority, a demonstration of the king's commitment to justice and the well-being of his subjects. It provided a common legal framework that helped to integrate the diverse peoples and regions of his empire, fostering a sense of shared identity under Babylonian rule. Historians still debate the extent to which these laws were truly implemented across the entire empire, or if they served more as a set of legal principles and a testament to the king's ideals. Regardless, its influence on subsequent legal systems in the ancient Near East is undeniable. While Babylon was rising to its zenith under Hammurabi, another power was quietly consolidating its strength to the north, in the fertile plains along the upper Tigris River. This was Assyria. Unlike the predominantly Sumerian or Amorite south, Assyria's heartland was centered around the city of Ashur, named after its chief deity. From its earliest days, Assyria's identity was intertwined with trade. Situated at a crucial crossroads, it controlled important trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and the Levant. The early history of Assyria is less well-documented than that of Sumer or Akkad, shrouded in the mists of time. However, archaeological discoveries, particularly the vast archives of Kanesh, modern Kultepe in Anatolia, have shed light on the old Assyrian trading colonies that flourished as early as the 19th century BCE. Assyrian merchants established extensive networks, trading tin and textiles from Mesopotamia for silver and other raw materials from Anatolia. These colonies operated with a remarkable degree of autonomy, maintaining their own laws and customs, yet remaining connected to Ashur through a complex system of communication and familial ties. Imagine the caravans, laden with goods, traversing hundreds of miles across rugged terrain, the merchants enduring the harsh sun and the ever-present threat of bandits, all to fuel the burgeoning trade of their homeland. For centuries, Assyria remained a regional power, occasionally asserting its dominance over its immediate neighbors, but never achieving the imperial scale of Ur-III or Hammurabi's Babylon. Its early kings, like Shamshi-Adad I, circa 1809 to 1776 BCE, did manage to create a short-lived empire that briefly rivaled Hammurabi's. Shamshi-Adad, a contemporary of Hammurabi, was a formidable conqueror who expanded Assyrian territory significantly, controlling trade routes and establishing a powerful administration. His empire, however, was a personal achievement, and it largely disintegrated upon his death, unable to withstand the rising power of Babylon. Following Shamshi-Adad's demise, Assyria entered a period of decline, often falling under the sway of more powerful states, including Babylon itself. The Kassites, a people from the Zagros Mountains, eventually conquered Babylon after Hammurabi's dynasty weakened, ushering in a period of Kassite rule that lasted for several centuries. During this time, Assyria remained a relatively minor player on the Mesopotamian stage, its ambitions curtailed, its energies focused on survival and maintaining its core territories. Yet even in these quieter centuries, the seeds of future greatness were being sown. The Assyrians developed a fierce martial tradition, honed by constant skirmishes and the need to defend their borders. Their society was structured around loyalty to the king and the god Ashur, fostering a strong sense of national identity. They were pragmatic and adaptable, learning from their neighbors and refining their own methods of warfare and administration. The very challenges they faced, constant external threats, the need to secure trade routes, forged a resilient and disciplined people. The art and architecture of this period reflect a growing distinctiveness. While still drawing on Mesopotamian traditions, Assyrian art began to develop its own unique stylistic elements. Chara, characterized by a powerful, often stark realism, especially in depictions of warfare and hunting. Their temples, though perhaps less grand than the ziggurats of the south, were built with a sense of solidity and permanence, reflecting the enduring spirit of their people. The period following the fall of Ur-III was thus a crucible, a time of both fragmentation and innovation. It saw the rise and zenith of the old Babylonian Empire under Hammurabi, a testament to the power of law and centralized governance. It also witnessed the quiet, patient development of Assyria, a northern kingdom that, though momentarily overshadowed, was steadily building the foundations for its own formidable future. The land between the rivers, ever dynamic, was once again reshaping itself, preparing for new empires and new chapters in its long and storied history. The echoes of Hammurabi's laws, carved in stone, would resonate for millennia, while the disciplined spirit of Assyria, forged in the crucible of the north, would one day erupt with a force that would shake the entire ancient world. The Bronze Age, with its intricate web of trade and diplomacy, had collapsed into a series of localized, often brutal, conflicts. The great palaces of Ugarit and Hattusa lay in ruins, their archives scattered or burned. From this crucible of chaos, a new material, harder and more abundant than bronze, began to forge a new era: iron. And with iron came a new kind of empire, one built not just on trade routes and diplomatic ties, but on an unprecedented scale of military organization and a deliberate policy of terror. This was the age of the Assyrian Empire, a power that would rise from the northern reaches of Mesopotamia to dominate the entire Near East, leaving an indelible, often chilling mark on history. For centuries, Assyria had been a regional power centered around its ancient capital of Ashur, a city perched strategically on a high cliff overlooking the Tigris River. Its early history was marked by periods of independence and subjugation, often overshadowed by the larger empires of Babylon or Mitanni. But by the 9th century BCE, something shifted. The Assyrians, a Semitic people, began to harness the potential of iron, not just for tools, but for weaponry. Iron swords, spearheads, and arrow tips proved superior to their bronze counterparts, sharper and less prone to bending. This technological advantage, combined with a ruthless military discipline, would transform them into an unstoppable force. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, as this period is known, truly began its ascent under kings like Ashurnasirpal II, reigned 883 to 859 BCE. His reign marked a deliberate turn towards aggressive expansion and a systematic use of fear as a tool of empire. Imagine the sight: the Assyrian army, a meticulously organized machine, marching across the plains. Their soldiers were equipped with iron armor, helmets, and shields. Their chariots were swift and deadly, and their siege engines, battering rams, movable towers, and sappers, were the most advanced of their time. They were masters of siege warfare, capable of breaching even the strongest city walls. But it wasn't just their military might that struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. It was their deliberate policy of psychological warfare. Ashurnasirpal II's inscriptions, carved onto the walls of his magnificent palace at Nimrud, openly boasted of the atrocities committed against rebellious cities, flaying captives alive, impaling them on stakes, piling their skulls into pyramids. These were not random acts of brutality, but calculated displays designed to break the will of any who dared to resist. The message was clear: submit or face utter destruction. This policy, while horrific, proved remarkably effective in consolidating control over vast territories. Conquered peoples were often deported en masse, their populations resettled in distant lands, a strategy designed to break their cultural identity and prevent future rebellions. This practice, known as forced deportation, was a hallmark of Assyrian rule, and it reshaped the demographics of the ancient Near East. The wealth amassed from these conquests was funneled into monumental building projects, transforming the Assyrian capitals into glittering centers of power. Ashurnasirpal II moved his capital from Ashur to Kalhu, modern Nimrud, where he built a new palace of astonishing scale and beauty. Its walls were adorned with elaborate stone reliefs, depicting scenes of royal hunts, military campaigns, and religious rituals. These reliefs, now housed in museums around the world, offer a vivid glimpse into the Assyrian worldview, a world dominated by a powerful king, supported by fearsome gods, and sustained by military conquest. The palace itself was a testament to Assyrian engineering, featuring vast courtyards, reception halls, and intricate irrigation systems that fed lush gardens. The empire continued its relentless expansion under subsequent kings. Shalmaneser III, reigned 859 to 824 BCE, campaigned extensively, clashing with a coalition of Syrian states at the Battle of Karkar in 853 BCE. While the outcome of this battle is debated by historians, some suggest an Assyrian victory, others a stalemate. It highlights the growing resistance to Assyrian dominance. Yet despite setbacks, the empire's momentum was undeniable. Tiglath-Pileser III, reigned 745 to 727 BCE, further reformed the army, making it a professional standing force rather than relying solely on conscription. He also introduced a more centralized administrative system, dividing the empire into provinces governed by loyal officials, further solidifying Assyrian control. Under Sargon II, reigned 722 to 705 BCE, the Assyrian Empire reached its zenith. He conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, deporting its inhabitants, and even captured Babylon, a city that had long been a thorn in Assyria's side. Sargon II built a magnificent new capital, Dur-Sharrukin, modern Khorsabad, a city designed from scratch to reflect the king's power and glory. Its massive walls enclosed a sprawling palace complex, adorned with colossal winged bullmen, lamassu, guarding its gates, their serene, watchful eyes seeming to gaze across the centuries. These lamassu, with their human heads, bull bodies, and eagle wings, were not merely decorative. They were powerful protective spirits, embodying the strength and divine authority of the Assyrian king. Sargon's second son, Sennacherib, reigned 705 to 681 BCE, moved the capital again, this time to Nineveh, an ancient city that he transformed into one of the largest and most impressive cities of the ancient world. Sennacherib's Nineveh was a marvel of urban planning, boasting vast parks, botanical gardens, and an elaborate system of aqueducts and canals that brought water from distant mountains, including the famous Jerwan Aqueduct, a massive stone structure that stretched for miles. Imagine the sheer scale of the undertaking, thousands of laborers working for years to construct a city worthy of the empire's might. Sennacherib's reign, however, was also marked by continuous warfare, most famously his siege of Jerusalem, an event recorded in both Assyrian annals and the Hebrew Bible. While the Assyrian account claims tribute was paid, the biblical narrative describes a miraculous deliverance, a testament to the enduring power of faith in the face of overwhelming force. The Assyrian Empire's cultural achievements were not limited to military prowess and monumental architecture. They were keen administrators, maintaining meticulous records on clay tablets, which have provided invaluable insights into their society, economy, and legal systems. Their scribes developed a highly efficient cuneiform script, and their libraries, particularly the one at Nineveh, were vast repositories of knowledge. Ashurbanipal reigned 668 to 627 BCE. Sennacherib's grandson was a scholar king, renowned for his passion for learning. He amassed an enormous library at Nineveh, collecting thousands of clay tablets, including copies of ancient Sumerian and Akkadian texts, literary works like the Epic of Gilgamesh, and scientific treatises. This library, discovered in the 19th century, has been an invaluable resource for understanding Mesopotamian civilization, preserving knowledge that would otherwise have been lost to time. It suggests a fascinating duality, a culture that could be brutally destructive, yet also deeply committed to the preservation of knowledge and the pursuit of intellectual endeavors. However, the very policies that had built the Assyrian Empire also sowed the seeds of its destruction. The constant warfare, the brutal suppression of rebellions, and the mass deportations created a vast empire held together by force and fear, but lacking true internal cohesion. The sheer scale of the empire, stretching from Egypt to the Zagros Mountains, made it difficult to govern effectively. Rebellions were constant, draining resources and manpower. The Assyrian heartland itself was increasingly strained by the demands of maintaining such a vast military machine. The final decades of the Assyrian Empire were marked by a rapid and dramatic decline. After the death of Ashurbanipal, a series of weak kings and internal power struggles further destabilized the empire. The subject peoples, long chafing under Assyrian rule, saw their opportunity. The Medes, an Indo-European people from the Iranian plateau, and the Babylonians, who had never truly accepted Assyrian dominance, formed an unlikely alliance. In 614 BCE, the Medes sacked Ashur, the ancient Assyrian religious capital, a symbolic blow to the empire's heart. The decisive moment came in 612 BCE, when the combined forces of the Medes and Babylonians laid siege to Nineveh, the glittering capital built by Sennacherib. Imagine the scene. The mighty walls, once thought impregnable, now surrounded by a vengeful army. The siege was long and brutal, but eventually the city fell. The destruction of Nineveh was catastrophic, its palaces plundered, its libraries scattered, its inhabitants slaughtered or enslaved. The city, once a symbol of Assyrian power, was reduced to rubble, a fate that echoed the destruction Assyria itself had inflicted on so many others. Historians still debate the exact circumstances of Nineveh's fall, whether it was due to a breach in the defenses, a change in the course of the Kausar River that weakened the walls, or simply overwhelming numbers, but the outcome was undeniable. The remnants of the Assyrian army made a final stand at Haran in 609 BCE, but they too were defeated. Within a few short years, the mighty Assyrian Empire, which had dominated the Near East for centuries, vanished from the political map. Its cities lay in ruins, its people scattered, and its language eventually faded from common use. The speed of its collapse, after such a prolonged period of dominance, remains a subject of historical fascination. Perhaps the empire, built on a foundation of iron and terror, simply could not sustain itself once the fear it instilled began to wane, and its enemies found the courage to unite against it. The legacy of Assyria, however, endures, in the ruins of its magnificent cities, in the chilling tales of its conquests, and in the thousands of clay tablets that whisper stories of a time when a single, formidable power sought to bend the world to its will. The fall of Nineveh marked not just the end of an empire, but a pivotal shift in the balance of power in the ancient world, paving the way for new empires to rise from the ashes. The twilight of Assyria, though dramatic and swift, did not plunge Mesopotamia into immediate darkness. Instead, from the ashes of Nineveh, a new star began to rise, one that had long flickered in the shadow of its northern rival, Babylon. The city, so often subjugated, sacked, and rebuilt, now found itself at the heart of a resurgent power, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It was a renaissance, a final, brilliant flourish for a civilization that had seen millennia of triumphs and trials. The architect of this revival was Nabopolassar, a Chaldean general who had declared himself king of Babylon in 626 BCE, seizing the moment of Assyrian weakness. His reign marked the true beginning of the Neo-Babylonian era, but it was his son, Nebuchadnezzar II, who would elevate Babylon to its legendary status, transforming it into a city of unparalleled splendor. Nebuchadnezzar II ascended to the throne around 605 BCE, inheriting an empire that had already begun to assert its dominance in the region. His reign, spanning over 4 decades, was a period of intense building, military expansion, and cultural flourishing. He understood that a powerful empire required not only strong armies, but also a magnificent capital, one that would inspire awe and reflect the glory of its ruler. Under his direction, Babylon was meticulously rebuilt and expanded, surpassing even its former grandeur. The city walls, already formidable, were reinforced and extended, creating a double circuit of immense thickness, often described as wide enough for chariots to turn upon their tops. The Ishtar Gate, a towering entrance adorned with glazed bricks depicting lions, bulls, and dragons, became a vibrant testament to Babylonian artistry and power. This gate, with its brilliant blue tiles, would have shimmered under the Mesopotamian sun, a dazzling welcome to all who approached the city. Within these impressive walls, Nebuchadnezzar embarked on a series of ambitious architectural projects. The Edamananki, the great ziggurat dedicated to Marduk, was meticulously restored and possibly enlarged, its 7 tiers reaching towards the heavens, a true house of the foundation of heaven and earth. It is this structure that many scholars believe inspired the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel, the testament to its awe-inspiring height and the ambition it represented. Near the royal palace, the famed Hanging Gardens of Babylon are said to have flourished, a terraced paradise of exotic plants and cascading water, built, according to legend, to alleviate the homesickness of Nebuchadnezzar's Median wife, Amidus. While archaeological evidence for the Hanging Gardens remains elusive, and some historians propose they may have been located in Nineveh, the persistent legend speaks to the lushness and sophistication attributed to Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. Regardless of their precise location, the very idea of such a marvel reflects the luxurious and advanced nature of the Neo-Babylonian court. Beyond its architectural wonders, Nebuchadnezzar's reign was marked by significant military campaigns that consolidated Babylonian control over the Levant. He campaigned extensively against Egypt, Phoenicia, and the kingdoms of Judah. It was during these campaigns that Jerusalem was besieged and ultimately conquered, leading to the destruction of the First Temple and the exile of its inhabitants to Babylon, an event profoundly documented in Hebrew scriptures. This Babylonian captivity, as it came to be known, was a pivotal moment in Jewish history, but for Babylon, it was another demonstration of its imperial might. The influx of skilled artisans, scribes, and scholars from conquered lands further enriched Babylonian culture, contributing to its intellectual vibrancy. Astronomy and mathematics, long cultivated in Mesopotamia, reached new heights during this period. Babylonian astronomers meticulously charted the movements of celestial bodies, developing sophisticated methods for predicting eclipses and calculating planetary positions. Their cuneiform tablets, filled with astronomical observations and mathematical calculations, demonstrate an advanced understanding of the cosmos, far surpassing that of many contemporary civilizations. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, though powerful, was relatively short-lived compared to the long reigns of its predecessors, like the Old Babylonian or Assyrian empires. After Nebuchadnezzar's death, in 562 BCE, a period of instability followed, marked by a succession of weak rulers and internal strife. The empire's final native king was Nabonidus, who ascended to the throne in 556 BCE. Nabonidus was an enigmatic figure, more interested in archaeology and religious scholarship than in the day-to-day administration of his vast empire. He famously favored the moon god Sin over Marduk, the traditional patron deity of Babylon, a move that alienated the powerful Marduk priesthood and much of the Babylonian populace. This religious divergence and Nabonidus's prolonged absence from Babylon, as he resided for many years in the oasis city of Tama in Arabia, further weakened the empire's central authority and left Babylon vulnerable. While Nabonidus's interest in ancient ruins led to the excavation and restoration of many temples, providing invaluable historical insights for modern archaeologists, his neglect of political and military affairs ultimately proved disastrous. As Babylon's internal cohesion frayed, a new power was rapidly consolidating its strength to the east, the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Under the brilliant leadership of Cyrus the Great, the Persians had swiftly conquered the Median Empire, Lydia, and the Greek cities of Ionia, building an empire of unprecedented scale. Cyrus was not merely a military genius, he was also a shrewd politician, known for his policy of religious tolerance and respect for local customs, a stark contrast to the often brutal Assyrian approach. His reputation preceded him, and many within the Babylonian Empire, including disaffected priests and even some of the exiled populations, saw him as a potential liberator rather than a conqueror. The final confrontation between the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Achaemenid Persians came in 539 BCE. The decisive battle took place at Opis, a city on the Tigris River, where the Babylonian army, led by Nabonidus's son Belshazzar, was decisively defeated. The Persian forces, under the command of Gubaru, then advanced on Babylon itself. The city, with its massive walls, was considered impregnable. However, the accounts of its fall vary. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, the Persians diverted the Euphrates River, which flowed through the city, allowing their soldiers to march along the dry riverbed and enter the city through its gates. Another account, from the Cyrus Cylinder, a famous cuneiform artifact, suggests that Babylon fell without battle, implying a less forceful entry, perhaps aided by internal dissent or a swift surrender. It's likely a combination of factors led to the city's rapid capitulation. The element of surprise, coupled with the discontent among the populace and the priesthood, probably played a significant role. On October 29, 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great entered Babylon, marking the end of Mesopotamia's independent ancient history. Unlike the Assyrians, who often destroyed conquered cities, Cyrus presented himself as a restorer of order and a liberator. He allowed the exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. He paid homage to Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, and portrayed himself as divinely chosen to rule. This policy of benevolent conquest ensured the loyalty of his new subjects and allowed Babylon to retain its cultural and economic importance, albeit now as a satrapy within the vast Persian Empire. The city continued to thrive as an administrative center and a hub of learning for centuries under Persian rule. But its days as the capital of an Ancient Mesopotamian empire were over. The fall of Babylon to Cyrus the Great was more than just a change of rulers. It signaled a profound shift in the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, which had seen the rise and fall of Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and now the Neo-Babylonians, passed into the hands of a new, expansive empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. The cuneiform script, the ziggurats, the epic tales of Gilgamesh, and the intricate legal codes of Hammurabi would continue to exist, preserved on clay tablets and in the collective memory of the region. But the driving force of Mesopotamian self-determination had ceased. The rich tapestry of its independent kingdoms, each contributing its unique thread to the fabric of human history, had reached its final, brilliant knot. The legacy of Mesopotamia, however, would endure. Its innovations in writing, law, astronomy, and urban planning, echoing through subsequent civilizations, shaping the very foundations of the world that followed. The great cities, now silent, still held within their ruins the whispers of millennia of human endeavor, a testament to the enduring spirit of a land that once birthed the very concept of civilization itself.